Alvarez, everybody. Welcome your backup plan tribe to today's wonderful show. Getting close to Christmas, and this is going to be broadcast on a podcast in January 2022. Wow, that sounds so weird, doesn't it? If you are new here, welcome to our show, Talking Taboo with Tina, brought to you by your backup plan app. We focus on real, raw conversations with real people. Yes, and our listeners about their journey from a life-changing event in their life. What is your backup plan app, anyways? Well, your backup plan app puts your life all in one place. So, in case of any unpredictable circumstance, while taking the painful tragedy, that painful aftermath out of that tragedy, and making your life simpler. One thing we can all count on is that we're all going to die, get sick, get disabled, get injured, or lose everything in a disaster and a tragedy. And we all know what that looks like, especially this year. It's been an incredible year around the globe with floods, with tragic flooding, actually, hurricanes, tornadoes recently. The condo collapse was fairly recent in Florida. Crazy things, wildfires this year in both California in the States as well as in British Columbia. Heat temperatures and just crazy climate changes as well as natural disasters. Putting it all the natural disaster as well as COVID. COVID hasn't been any different, especially this year. We're all going down to another lockdown, and it puts us into retrospect of what happened last year. And we will probably never see the new normal. This is our new normal life now. So be prepared for the unexpected, because it won't happen to me is an illusion. We're not Superman. Even though Superman just came out in a movie, we are not Superman, okay? And we live complicated lives, and we need to be better prepared, because we can't hope that the city, the province, or the state, or the country is going to have our back, because we need to take charge of what we need to be prepared for. And that's what we help you do in the app. And just like Mike Tyson's famous quote, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Yes, and that's so true. So what the app does is help you put together a DIY plan for yourself. And we're launching very soon our new Emerging Blueprint program that coincides with your backup plan app, that helps you understand your own documents, helps you understand what you need, what you don't need. It has worksheets and templates, family conversation worksheets, library of videos. It's going to be so cool. Lots of interviews with attorneys and lawyers from around the world. I'm so excited to get that started. So let's get this party going here. Of course, my name is Tina Ginn. I am a best-selling author, an emergency preparedness coach, and a financial expert and an app developer of your backup plan app. And I'm located here in today, beautiful Vancouver, BC. I'd like to welcome all of you who are new to our channel. I'm super happy to have you here today. Those of you who are repeat subscribers and followers, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. The button, and I'm going to get my hand out, the button is down here in the corner, right there. Click on that little bell and click on the subscribe button so that you get notified of our next shows. I'd like to welcome United States and Canada and the UK for being our biggest listeners of our show. Of course, as well, Germany is next. So meine deutsche Freunde sind in unserem Podcast willkommen. Wenn Sie Kommentare haben, können Sie gern Fragen stellen. Also danke für deine Freundschaft auch. Danke fürs Zuhören, meine deutsche Freunde. So let's get this party started, everybody. If you found us, then you are here for a reason. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, to your loved ones as well, that this may help in their journey, in their change of life-changing event, whatever it might be. We are here to help you. Our special guest today is David Hollingsworth, and he's from Virginia, United States. And I'd like to welcome him. The show is very, very cool story. The more obstacles I overcome, the stronger I become. And that was well said by Gracie Alvarez. And I'm just going to let's bring David on our show. Welcome, David. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tina. It's great to be here.
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear your story. I'm going to give a little introduction for our listeners so everybody can better understand who is David.
Sure.
And what happened to David. That's what we're going to talk about today. David is an award-winning speaker, storyteller, and author of the book, Get Out the Door. He speaks on achievement, resilience, goal setting, overcoming obstacles, and service excellence through his engaging humor and personal storytelling. In 2004, David experienced a devastating motorcycle accident that fractured his spine and left him unable to stand or walk. Join him on his journey from his wheelchair to successfully running up the Empire State Building and many, many more triathlons. He is a dynamic, entertaining speaker who speaks to corporate and association audiences, special need communities, and trauma accident survivor groups. Well, that is quite the introduction, David. Welcome to our show. You know, David, I kind of wore my Canadian shirt for y'all today so that you can feel the vibes from Canada.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about your journey in 2004 and what the kind of life that you had been living and how that changed so that our listeners get a better understanding.
Sure. In 2004, I was going through what some would call a midlife crisis. I decided I wanted to learn how to ride a motorcycle. And and like the way I pretty much go after everything else, I will research everything on how to do that. I read up on what's the best instruction to take, what's the best motorcycle to get for a beginner, what are the best safety procedures, the best safety equipment, and I had planned to do everything extremely safe. In fact, I had not gone out on any public streets other than just riding around in parking lots in my own little housing subdivision.
To get used to the feeling.
And I had planned to take the Motorcycle Safety Foundation course that upcoming weekend. So July 9th, 2004, which happened to be my mom's birthday. And my wife at the time was vacationing down with her parents down in North Carolina. The babysitter was with the kids, and I was going to take just 15, 20 minutes to ride around the neighborhood and get some practice in before the class the next day. I was practicing in a parking lot, doing figure eights and going back and forth, starting and stopping. And on my third pass across, I accelerated across the parking lot. And then the plan was to hit the clutch and brake and stop suddenly, because that's one of the things they teach in the class. Well, as I accelerated, I hit a patch of sand in the parking lot, and the bike started to slip. And if you're hanging on to something and you start to fall, the tendency is to grab onto whatever you've got close to you. And if you're right-handed, you tend to grab harder on the right side of the handlebars, which happened to be the throttle. And the bike shot forward, and before I had a chance to get on the clutch and brake and stop the bike, I hit a curb, bounced into the air, and landed with my spine directly on the corner of the curb. And as soon as I hit the ground, I knew it was bad. I'm, looking up, wiggling my fingers to see, okay, does that work? And wiggling my left foot and then trying to wiggle my right toes and realizing they didn't work.
Were you connected to the bike still, or had the
No,
bike
I
gone
was.
somewhere else?
I went over I bounced up, and the bike was up on the grass, and I was laying literally across the curb. Somebody saw it happen, and called the paramedics who came to get me, and they were holding me stable while they tried to figure out, what was damaged.
Mhm.
And when we got to my right leg was completely paralyzed. They put me in a neck brace and on a backboard and transported me to the hospital.
And it was paralyzed right away?
Yes, I could not feel my right leg.
Okay.
And so they got enough out of me to get some phone numbers to contact some people, my wife, my neighbors, somebody to get the kids. And then they had to have stabilized me for about 48 hours before they would attempt surgery. And right before surgery, the doctor, said, we're going to do everything we can, but I can't guarantee that you're going to walk again.
But your head was okay.
My head was okay. I was wearing a helmet. I was wearing gloves, a jacket, padded motorcycle pants, and boots. I was very well protected on the bike, but when I got thrown off of it, I hit something very hard.
Yeah.
Which was what fractured my spine. It was what the ER report said, an explosive burst fracture of the L2 vertebra compressed on 3 axes of the spinal cord. So the spinal cord was compressed by about 60%. And that pressure was what was making my right leg not feel anything. And after a 7-hour surgery, they brought me out and we went into recovery. And then that was kind of the stage for everything else that happened after that. But yeah, before surgery, I was told that I might never walk again. And when I look at the x-rays, they were pretty scary.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So sorry to hear that. And you wouldn't think, in just a parking lot practicing, that anyone
No,
could
it's
hurt
like
themselves.
you would think that was literally the safest place that I could be. There were no other vehicles. There were no other people. It was just me, the bike, in an elementary school parking lot.
Yeah.
And even the bike, it wasn't some big Harley Davidson motorcycle. This is a little Honda Rebel 250, and I think Rebel would be in quotes. It's about the smallest street legal bike there is.
Oh, geez.
But even that, it's supposed to be the perfect beginner bike, and I think it is. But even that can get away from you.
Yeah, I have a client who was at the light, and they had the same sort of. They had just started riding as well.
Mm-hmm.
The light turned green. They were at a stoplight, and the light turned green. And as soon as they went, they flipped over the handlebars, and yeah, they're in a wheelchair and will never be the same. And it wasn't like they were speeding or going fast. I mean, they were at a stoplight. So
well, yeah, and I was literally in an elementary school parking lot. If the bike had hit the curb 12 inches to the left or the right, I would have just gone over the handlebars and into the grass. But right where it was the pavement dropped down about 4 inches. So the bike stopped. Then I went over and hit the curb.
Yeah. So,
yeah, it was quite the sudden and unexpected event. And I thought I was just going to be out for 10 minutes. And literally it changed the entire trajectory of what I was doing at the time.
Well, and your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in the hospital actually, let's even back up. After surgery, they had me in recovery for about 6 or 7 days before they transported me to rehab. And before they did, they wanted me to stand because I was literally bolted back together. They glued my L2 back together, did a bone graft for my hip, and put 2 titanium rods and 4 screws to hold everything together. And they wanted to see if I could stand before they transported me to rehab. And with 2 people on either side of me, they got me standing, but I couldn't stay up by myself.
Right.
Then they transported me to rehab, and I was vomiting blood and all sorts of other yucky stuff all the way over to the other hospital. And they had to intubate me at the rehab hospital. And so I couldn't speak while they're trying to get all this gunk out of my stomach. And after the
what does that cause from, David, do you think?
Well, from the impact, there's a lot of internal soft tissue damage, and just a lot of blood and stuff that had collected that needed to come out one way or the other.
Right.
And it was causing me to vomit a lot.
Neck and stuff, yeah.
So they intubated me to get to vacuum all that out, and even though technically I could breathe, I didn't feel like I could. I felt like I was suffocating. And after it had been in there for about 12 or 13 hours, I rang the nurse's call button. This is like 4 a.m. And I wrote on the pad, "Take this thing out." And she said, "I can't, I don't know what will happen. You might die if we do it." And I wrote on the pad, "I don't care. I just wanted it out." Now, the good news is, once they took it out, I could breathe normally. They'd gotten all the stuff out, and I slowly stabilized. But at the time, I literally didn't care if I lived or died at that point.
Right.
Because I literally felt like I couldn't breathe.
And what does that cause from? Did they say what that feeling is?
I'm not sure where that feeling comes from, but I wanted that pain to be over. And, you start to learn where your limits are and that you're not invulnerable.
How true is that?
Yeah. That's
You're not Superman.
No, I think before the call we were talking about that, and I said, I'm not a DC superhero. I'm a Marvel superhero, which like Spider-Man and Iron Man, they all have great abilities, but they're all vulnerable. They all have their frailties and character defects that make them human. And the other achievements are nothing without that humanity. That's what makes them real. And I learned, where that limit was. And once I got stable from that, then the whole journey for rehab started. And I was in the hospital for about 2.5 months, learning to stand and walk again.
Could you talk right away?
Yeah, once they took that out, I could talk. Once they pulled the tube out.
Yeah.
And I did swear a lot going through rehab because it was quite painful. I had literally lost all the strength in my right leg and had to build that back up from zero. So it was learning how to build the strength to pull myself up out of a wheelchair, to stand at a set of parallel bars, to take one tiny step while I'm supporting myself with my arms. And each day was just
another challenge.
Yeah, it was a new challenge, and progress was never in a straight line. There'd be days when I'd really advance and days when I felt like I was going back 3 or 4 steps. But between wanting to be better and being angry about being in the hospital and not being around my kids, that sort of pushed me to work harder and harder to get to the point where it was about a week before they discharged me. They were going to discharge me to a lower level of rehab from home. And my nurse, who had been with me from the beginning, she was from the Ivory Coast in Africa. Her name was Peace.
Oh,
And
nice.
I said, "Hey, Peace, take a look at this." And she came over and I locked my wheelchair into position. And she had seen me when I came in and got intubated that night. I locked the wheelchair into position, pushed myself up to stand, and then slowly took step by step by step around the nurse's station. It was really only about 30 feet. And I got back to the wheelchair and kind of fell into it. And I said, "What do you think of that?" She had tears in her eyes because she saw what I was like when I came in. And that's one thing that's interesting is it's hard to know how far you come in a particular journey because you have no perspective
Well, you don't
on
see yourself,
you don't see yourself from the
right?
outside, but she had
Yeah.
seen how far I had come, and that helped me realize that, yeah, this was a big deal. Um, that when I came in, I couldn't walk, and now I could walk again, and that's something that wasn't a sure thing when I came into
No,
the hospital.
no. And
But
talking.
yeah, and talking, even going to the bathroom on my own. In the book I write about, you know, at first, I had to have assistance from nurses and orderlies to go to the bathroom. Um, and I had to ring the bell. I'd have to get somebody to kind of rotate me, tilt me up, help me into the wheelchair, push me in the wheelchair, get to the bathroom, do all the reverse things to get into the bathroom. And one day I noticed I had to go and rang the bell and nothing.
Uh-oh.
There's nobody coming. And, I'm like ringing a bit more urgently and hoping that I'm going to make it. And I realized there's no cavalry coming over the hill. This is all me, and it's either going to be I make it or clean up on aisle 3. It was I'm sweating. I'm like pushing myself up, lowering myself into the wheelchair, rolling myself over, and straining to get myself out of the wheelchair and into position. And then I made it, and I'm literally crying because I made it to the bathroom, and like even those little tiny things
Mhm.
become such a big deal.
It's so shocking, isn't it, when something's been injured and you
Yeah.
can't use your right hand or you can't use your legs, or going to the washroom is such a
Oh,
huge goal for the day.
and
And,
I
you
felt
know,
like I felt like I'd climbed Mount Everest.
yeah.
It was I was elated by the fact that I didn't have to have help at that point. And you know, I laugh about it now, but when it was happening, it was pure panic. And I,
So what did your wife and kids do in these 2 months that you were doing this rehab?
well, the hospital was about 45 minutes from the house, so they couldn't come every day. Um, they came when they could, um, but it was they were waiting for dad to get better. I would talk on the phone as much as I could, but every time I saw them, they would change a little bit because at the time they were 6 and 9 years old. And so every time you see them, they've changed.
Yeah.
And it took a long time after I got home for them to feel like dad's going to be okay. Because if I wasn't home on time, they would worry that something else had happened.
Right. And so when this sort of thing happens, I mean, I'm sure they're worried about you recovering and
Mhm.
getting better and to come home. But in the meantime, your wife has now had to change all of her life changing event for her too, because now she has to find someone to help out with the kids or pay the bills, or what's
Yeah,
your job do? Like, where's the
right.
income coming from? What bank accounts do I use? Like,
Right.
your
And
whole life.
fortunately, you know, um, even though I'm not the best planner in the world, I had put a lot of things in place before that helped. We had an au pair at the time who helped us with the kids, so that part continued as normal. With my job, I made sure that I had short and long term disability insurance that took care of my pay and recovery.
Good. That's good.
so that the family wasn't inconvenienced or harmed by what happened to me. Um, and I didn't have, at the time, I didn't have any, vision of everything I needed to
Something
do to be
happening. Yeah.
prepared,
Yeah.
but I did do that. And it reminds me of a quote that, is attributed to David Eisenhower, Dwight David Eisenhower, that in battle, plans are useless, but planning is essential. That when something happens, you're going to scramble. It's not going to come off just as you expect it. You're going to have to make changes and adapt to the situation. But if you've got the plans in place, that part of the thinking is already done. You don't
Yes.
have to worry about that, and you can focus on doing what's necessary right now.
Well, and I talk about that in our shows about being present,
Mhm.
because when something like that happens, your mind goes, "Oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills?
Mhm.
Where's this? Where's that? What do I do for this? Who do I call for that? What's my account number?"
Yeah, and
Your brain just goes cuckoo.
yeah, since then, I've made it a point to have multiple copies of all my critical and insecure areas, that's not going to be compromised online. But there is a certain number of trusted professionals or professionals or other people that I trust that
Mhm.
have access to that information if I can't get to it.
Right.
Um, and I've made sure since then that you know accident insurance, disability insurance, and life insurance is, you know, the right amount for the right things. In fact, I have so much life insurance, I don't call it insurance anymore. I call it incentive. That if something happens to me, I want them to make sure that they check that at least it looks like an accident. Um, but I made sure that financial security is one of the things that I focused on. If something does happen to me, that the family and kids are fine.
Yeah,
That's
because you
one thing
can't
they don't.
change the part of you not being there,
That's good.
obviously, right?
It doesn't replace
So,
me,
no.
um, and it's not as funny as me, but at least the basics are taken care of.
Right. The assistance that's needed at the time. It's like having the tornado that came through Kentucky this last week.
Yeah,
Um, People losing everything right down to the ground of their foundation.
yeah. And when
Um,
I was I think 4 years old, my entire town was wiped out by a series of tornadoes that came through Indiana, and fortunately, our particular house wasn't hit, but many of our neighbors lost everything.
yeah. Yeah. So we talk about that to what you would like to keep, and where are you going to store it so
Sure.
that, that type of thing also. So you ended up getting home about 2 months later and started your new life at home.
Yeah, it was. The I was off of work for a full 6 months. I had to wear what they call a TLSO brace. It's thoracic lumbar sacral something. Um, I don't know what the O
A
stands for.
pain in the neck brace.
Yeah, a pain in the neck, back, spine, hips. It was like a plastic clamshell that went from my armpits all the way down to my hips. It's like
Oh,
like a giant turtle shell, and I had to wear it 24 hours a day at first. And as I got stronger, and I had to walk every day. I went from walking to the mailbox, which is day one, um, and walking further and further and further until eventually I was walking about 7 miles a day. Um, and when I went back to work, I had to wear the TLSO brace during the day. And I got on a plane to, I think I was flying to Phoenix. And I had to go through, this was post 9/11. So you had to go through enhanced security. Um, and they said, you've got to take this brace off. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. Might be like the slinky dog where everything just falls apart. Um, Fortunately, I didn't fall apart. And by the time February or March rolled around, about 9 months, I was able to get rid of the brace completely.
oh, nice.
And, and eventually, go back to more normal things. But it was a very slow process to add things back into my life. Like it took a year before I was able to get back on a bicycle again.
What about
And
sitting, David?
sitting
Was
was fine.
sitting okay?
Oh, it's fine. People ask me, do I have back pain? And no, I don't have any back pain because I am bolted together. My spine's in great shape these days. And that's, 17 years post accident. So I'm very happy with how the surgery turned out and how I learned to build things back to normal. But it's been a constant journey of, you know, learning what I could do after the accident.
Yeah.
Because after I got discharged from normal care, I asked the doctor, you know, can I drive? Can I do this? And I said, yeah, you can do anything you want. I said, can I run? And he said, yeah, if somebody's chasing you.
Oh, if you have
So
to,
if you have to, but
so to speak.
yeah, about 8 years after the accident, I'd kind of stalled out in a lot of areas. Personally, I wasn't in a good place. I had gained a lot of weight, and I decided that I wanted to make some changes, and um, I I didn't know if I could run. So the very first time I went out there, and I jogged, which is the best way I can describe it, about 60 feet. Um, but the next day I did 60 feet again,
Oh,
and um, each day I would add just a little bit more. I would walk 60 feet, jog 60 feet, walk 60, and just add to the distance. And over time, after about 6 months, I actually went out and ran my first 5K after the accident. So this is like 2012, no, 2013 at this point.
wow.
And wasn't fast. I was, back of the pack runner, but I could run. And that really got me excited to see where I could go with that.
Mm-hmm.
So over the next 6 months, I kept, training longer and further. And in 6 months, I went from, about 8 months, I went from running my first 5K to running a half marathon in Indianapolis. And I thought, if I can do a half, why can't I do the whole thing? So in December of 2013, right before 2014, it was going to be the 10th anniversary year of the accident. I put together a bucket list of everything I wanted to do. And
why do you think that? Why do you think you wanted to do that? A bucket list. Do you think the whole life-changing event made you want to do that?
yeah, it was, I have a pretty wide stubborn streak. And I don't like being told no. So part of it was just my stubbornness to say, people said I couldn't do this, I'm going to do this. But it was also to hopefully inspire other people to see what they could do. So in February, I signed up for an event for raising money to run up the Empire State Building. And I don't know which was scarier, running up the Empire State Building or having to raise $2,500. Because
I think the $2,500 is probably
well, they
the
said,
worst
well, they
part.
were the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, who I raised the funds for. They were very helpful in giving ideas on how to raise the funds, but they were clear on, look, if you're committing to this, you're going to bring $2,500, whether it's through donations or your own. So I was, it's like that line that Sean Connery says in Hunt for Red October. It says, when Cortez came to the New World, he burned his boats. Thus his men were highly motivated. I was highly motivated to raise the money. I ended up raising twice that amount.
Oh, that's good.
And it was a blast. It was a lot of fun to do. And that was in February. Then in April and May, I ran 2 sprint triathlons. And I signed up for the Marine Corps Marathon and started training for that. And I had to come up with a coach and a trainer and all these other things to again, all the planning that I had to put in place to make this happen.
Right.
Because, you know, I wasn't 22 years old at the time. I was a lot older. And I had to make sure that I didn't get injured in training and that I trained enough. And about a week before the event, Comcast Sportsnet, came out to interview me for their TV show. And they said, "What's the hardest thing about training for a marathon?" And I thought, the hardest thing wasn't recovering from the accident. The hardest thing wasn't training for it. And the hardest thing wasn't running the hardest thing was getting my butt off the couch and getting out the door every day. Because once I got up and got moving, the rest of it just kind of fell into place. So I said,
but do you think when we have injuries like that, David, that we tend to, well, I'll wait, and it's easier just to not do it?
Oh yeah, in fact, the easiest thing to do is just to kind of keep doing what you're doing. As I tell people, change is traumatic at best, even if it's positive change, because it's just different and it interrupts what you're doing on a daily basis. But once you make that change, that becomes part of your new normal. And it becomes easier just to keep going than it does to stop. So stubbornness does have its advantages. That once I started doing that every day, it became easier just to keep training for it. And once I got done, it was like, wow, this was hard. But once I broke it down into small chunks, it was a lot more straightforward than I expected it to be.
The achievement overrode the challenge.
Yeah. And the challenge was part of the story because, it wouldn't have been as interesting if the challenge wasn't there. Because I see elite athletes and people who are, they all work hard. Nobody does that. Just nobody gets off the couch and decides to run a marathon. Everybody who does that works hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
But the story was not how fast I did it or what my time was, whatever. It was everything that built up to that. And the race itself was almost anticlimactic because without the other story, it wouldn't have been as exciting.
Right. So what do you find is the challenge now for you? Having done all of those goals.
Well, it's trying to figure out, okay, what is the next thing? As everybody gets older every day, and some days when I'm working out, it's really just to maintain what I'm currently doing. But one of the things I also found was rewarding for me, which was telling stories. And I had been getting on stage telling stories at the Moth and other storytelling shows. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of doing that. About learning to tell a story that people can put themselves into. And when I wrote this first book, the first draft was all about me. And my editor handed the book back and he said, "Dave, this is a great story, but nobody's going to read it but you." Because it is literally all about you. So I
is this the Get Out the Door book that you're talking about?
Yeah. And I had to reframe the story into something that other people could see themselves in, because not everybody, most people, if they're smart, don't want to run a marathon. It's not fun. It is a slog, and you have to do months of training and all these other things to get to that. But everybody has obstacles they want to overcome. Everybody has things that get thrown in their way. Everybody has goals they want to achieve. And that's where I felt the story was. And once I finished that book, it's okay, what's the next book? What's the next challenge? So I've got about 3 or 4 books in the pipeline to get out there, because I think that the stories themselves are valuable in what other people can see themselves in those stories.
Mm-hmm.
I have, Get Out the Door has been out since February. I have a book that just came out about, I'm one of, I think, 12 authors in the book about a book about humor, about adding humor to your stories. And I have a blog where I put out stories of different subjects that, I try to get things out every week, but, I do the best I can on that.
Yeah.
But really, what is the next story? What is the next thing that I can do to inspire or help other people?
Oh, that's lovely. And everybody, the listeners, all of David's information is in the description box below on the podcast as well as the live stream. So, so David, what do you think you would like other injured people to know? I mean, listening to you and with what difficulties I've had personally, I find patience the hardest struggle in your own mind. And that's because we don't want to just take that one step and think that's okay. Like we need the patience to appreciate how far we've come. And that part for me, I think is hard to deal with, that patience.
It can be. What I found was that things that you may not think about become very important. Being able to realize that progress is never in a straight line. You may go forward 2 days, may go back the next two. You may take a detour. Your plans may change. Things get thrown in your way you didn't expect. So progress is never in a straight line. The other part is that things like anger and stubbornness and character traits that may be seen as negative can actually be pretty positive if you put them in the right perspective. We're talking about Superman and other superheroes. One of my favorites is the Incredible Hulk. And in one of the movies, the character who plays the Hulk says, "You want to know my secret? I'm always angry." And that I felt was something that if you point it in the right direction, anger can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to use it for good instead of as a negative.
Into persistence and
Yeah, it can turn into positive things if you channel it in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think was challenging, the most challenging part of this journey so far in these 17 years?
I really getting up every day and getting at it is continuing to rinse and repeat as many times as necessary to keep moving in the right direction. And if there's a detour, to recognize that detour early so you can take action to move things back in the right direction.
And what do you think was the most challenging in the 17 years with your family, you and your family?
Well, it did take a toll on the family. It's as I mentioned with my kids, they were worried about what's going to happen to me. Am I going to be around? And it made me more aware of the things that I needed to put into place so that if something did happen, that the impact wouldn't be as severe. Like in 2008, I got hit by a car while I was on my bicycle. I wasn't seriously hurt, but I could have been.
Especially with your other injuries.
Yeah, and that was one of my worries at the time, is that when the guy hit me, he blew right through a stop sign and hit me while I was in the crosswalk. Initially, he claimed that I rode out in front of him, but fortunately, I had enough, telemetry. I had like a GPS and a heart rate monitor and all these other things that showed me stopping at the intersection, waiting for the traffic to clear, and then him passing 3 cars on the right, and I ended up on his hood. Fractured a vertebrae, but not seriously. So I didn't have to go through a lot of rehab after that, but I was aware of how vulnerable I was just doing something normal.
And did you think, oh, this again?
That was my first thought. It was, I went up on the hood of the car and then back down to the pavement. I was still attached to the bike because my pedals were still clipped in. And the guy reaches down to help me up, and I'm like, "Get your hands off of me!" And I was so mad that he hit me. Fortunately, I wasn't seriously hurt. Insurance took care of the bike, took care of my medical bills. So it goes back to making sure that I have those things in place, because you can't predict what's going to happen.
No.
I am more careful these days, but I'm also aware that something can happen that I don't expect.
Yeah, it's just unusual that you've had similar instances of the same thing.
Yeah, it's I don't want to think that I'm a crash magnet, but it has happened at least twice.
Is that what your kids call you?
No, that's what the folks at work called me. They literally called me Crash, because I did have another accident with a car. I was taking a performance driving course at Summit Point Raceway, and one of the things that the instructors will tell you there is if a meteor falls from the sky and crushes your car, that's an accident. Everything else is driver error. Well, I'm still calling it an accident. One day I had an instructor in the car next to me, on the seat in the car next to me, and we lost the brakes on the car coming down the straightaway. And I glanced over and I said, "We have no brakes."
Oh,
and
gee.
what they tell you to do in driving is to look where you want to go, not at what you want to avoid. So I'm looking where the turn goes over here. But by that time, we had gone onto the grass and the car is not turning. So I'm looking at the trees coming up in front of us. And they say, if you're going to hit something smaller versus something larger, hit something softer versus something harder. And if you can go between something, do that. So I saw these two trees and I couldn't get to either side. I thought, okay, get between the trees. And the car just went thump right up to the mirrors, right between the trees.
Oh, really?
And I looked at him. He said, "You okay?" He said, "Yep, you okay?" We climbed out of the car, and everybody was okay, but things happen. And I learned that your brakes can fail when you least expect it.
And it wasn't supposed to happen that way.
It was not
obviously.
supposed to happen. We were in about the safest place we could be.
Wow. That's a scary thought, though, when your brakes don't work.
Yeah, it's your mind really races to say, okay, what do I do now? You've got to check for your emergency brake. You've got to see if you can pump the brakes. You can see how do you slow down, and it all happens just in a few seconds.
And it's kind of like hitting ice, I find.
Yeah, once we hit the grass, the car was just, Isaac Newton was in charge at that point. We were at the mercy of physics.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was good thinking on your part for going somewhere safe.
Yeah, we didn't have a scratch. The car was totaled, but we were fine.
Oh, that's awesome. So what do you think you would have for the listeners to your last final messages, from maybe something from your book, or what were you thinking?
Well, the thing that I tell people is, as I said before, most people, if they're smart, don't want to run a marathon. But everybody has goals they want to achieve. Everybody has obstacles that they want to overcome, or things that get thrown in their way. And the hardest thing to do isn't overcoming the obstacle or going after the goal. The hardest thing to do is just every day getting out the door. And once you get out the door, the rest is easy, because you're in motion. And once you're in motion, you can go anywhere you want to go.
Whether you want to take that long walk or short walk or whatever.
Absolutely.
That is.
And that is all up to you. Is it where do you want to go? If you decide where you want to go, you can get there.
That's awesome. And so in your book, because we don't want to forget not talking about that. So why should people purchase your book? It's your journey, obviously.
Yeah, I think that if they have things where they think they're stuck, they may see some of the things that I talk about that they've run into as well. I talk about the things that were successes. I also talk about some fairly painful personal things that I went through over that journey. And that journey still isn't complete. And I think that if people want to see what they can do to turn their life in a better direction, um, the book is about getting started. And that is the launching pad for everything else you want to do. So that's what I think the benefit of the book is that once you get started, you can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And you sure don't think that, though, when you're like
Oh,
you were lying in that hospital bed with the tube down your throat.
no, I was not thinking about, hey, I'm going to go run a marathon. That was completely the furthest thing from my mind. That at that point, it was getting the tube out. It was learning to stand. It was doing all
Going
the
to the bathroom.
yeah, going to the bathroom, which was an achievement in and of itself. But once you get the basics done, it's like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do now? And there's a whole universe of possibilities out there. And once you get started, the whole world opens up to you.
And I think, from our other shows of life-changing events, support is so
Mhm.
needed.
Yeah, surrounding yourself with good people, finding out what resources you need to use. You're not the first person to try to do almost anything. Somebody else has been through what you've been through. And
But you must have had good support, a good family too.
yeah, I did have a good support team around me, and it was important to recognize that I had to lean on them at times. You can't do everything yourself.
Even though you think you can.
Oh, and me especially. Yeah. I've had to learn that lesson time and time again.
That's true. Did you have any other messages you'd like to give the listeners?
No, I think that especially as we're coming down to the end of the year and start of the new year, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions and a lot of people abandon them after 3 weeks or so. Get started. Once you get started, you can get started again. I mean, it's the same exercise. And knowing that progress is not in a straight line, all progress is progress, even if it's just deciding to move forward. So don't think of it as a New Year's resolution. Think of it as, okay, what do I do now? And once you decide that, you can go anywhere you want to go.
Right. No matter what obstacles ahead
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah. Obstacles are just part of the journey. They make the story interesting.
And that's the truth.
That's the truth. Absolutely.
I feel like Bugs Bunny or something. And that's the truth.
Absolutely. Well, Lily Tomlin, I think, is the one. She had the character that would say, "And that's the truth," and make a funny noise.
Yeah, I think I just couldn't remember who that was. It was almost like the Laugh-In show or something where
Oh
they
yeah.
used to,
Oh yeah.
wasn't it Colonel
Yeah.
Clank or something? I'm
That was
trying to
Artie
think back.
Johnson. Yeah, Artie Johnson was the guy in the little German helmet. But yeah. Lily Tomlin played a character named Edith Ann who would sit in the chair and say, "That's the truth."
Yeah, and she'd say that. Yeah, that's right. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't. I knew I had heard it from something as soon as you said it. So
Mhm.
there you go. Well, thank you, David. That was a wonderful story, actually, of your resilience and your courage and your anger that comes in handy, your persistence.
Mhm.
Showing people that even as something as simple as a motorcycle in a parking lot, how tragic of an injury you can get into as well as overcome.
Yeah.
it's my client was, like I said, was just sitting at the light and he flew right over the handlebars.
Yeah, things can happen that you don't expect.
And he has a brain injury for the rest of his life.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, everybody over Christmas and the holidays, and once we're into January and February, please stay safe. Anything, like David said, can happen. Ice is a terrible thing too, because you never know when you're going to hit black ice.
Hmm.
And that can spin you around a few times,
I've done that.
which I've done,
Hmm.
and wonder where you're going to end up after you're spinning.
Hmm.
So I want to thank you for coming on our show, David. I appreciate all of your knowledge and your humor and your excitement for people to get a goal and have a step forward.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed coming on the show and look forward to hearing from your audience.
Awesome. And all of David's information is down below. So please take a moment and, as we said, subscribe to the show, because you want to click on that bell. Ring my bell. Ring my bell down below, right down there somewhere. I'm not sure where it is on here, but subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified of our next shows. Just like, stay tuned for our podcast and live streams. I have great conversations with some of the most interesting and accomplished people in the world today. I think you will all be entertained, informed, and I hope that we've inspired and motivated you to start thinking about your unique plan. No one is Superman. No one is Spider-Man. So expect the unexpected. I want to, if you are thinking of someone right now during the show, someone special in your mind, please reach out to them today, because you don't know what tomorrow may bring. And we all have phones, text, Skype, Facebook, Zoom. Like, you can do it. You can reach out to that person that you're thinking about today, because you don't know what tomorrow may bring. We were all on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, as well as a Facebook community group, which you can find on our channel. Thank you for taking the time and sharing it with us. I love each and every one of you. And I always end our show, David, with Carol Burnett. I know you know who Carol Burnett is.
Yep.
I'm so glad we had this time together, just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes the time we have to say so long.
Tug your ear. Yeah.
So everybody stay safe. Expect the unexpected. Be kind. Until the next time. Nice to see everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
You stay there, David.
Just I strolled without a care, cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile on my face. Yeah, so lift me up, I'm moving on, singing and dancing while I play my song.
Hey there.
There we go.
Yeah, I lost my light about